All right, today we're diving into a powerful ancient story. It's one that starts with total desolation and somehow transforms into this incredible vision of hope. We're talking about the parable of the Watchman in the Valley of Choice. So, this is the question that's really at the heart of the whole story. And you'd think the answer is pretty obvious, right? Of course not. But as we're about to see, sometimes the most desolate places become the stage for the most mind-blowing miracles. Our journey starts in a place of just complete and total loss. We're stepping right into a vision of despair, a scene that basically defines hopelessness. Okay, so to really get this vision, you need a little bit of context. This is all happening during a national crisis, the Great Exile. The whole nation is shattered, and our guide through this is a priest named Ezekiel, who's carrying the weight of his people's collapse, kind of standing watch over the ruins. And this is where things get really intense. Ezekiel is taken not to a field or a forest, but to a valley where the floor is just littered with human bones. It's this silent, sprawling graveyard, a monument to some long-past catastrophe. Now, the language used here is so specific and so important. The bones aren't just dead, they are very dry. This means it's an absolute final end. There's no moisture, no memory of what life was, and absolutely zero trace of hope. It's the very picture of finality. So right there in the middle of all this hopelessness, God asks a question that honestly sounds kind of absurd. Looking out at this sea of ancient, dry remains, he asks a regular guy, "Mortal, can these bones live?" It's a huge test of perspective, of faith versus what you can see with your own two eyes. And Ezekiel's answer? It's just brilliant. He doesn't say no, which is what most of us would say, right? That's the logical answer. And he doesn't give some cheap, easy yes either. Instead, he just defers to a power that's way beyond him, admitting he has no idea and putting the possibility entirely in God's hands. And that answer, that's what kicks off the next part of this story. Ezekiel is now told to take part in something that seems totally impossible. This is where the physical assembly begins, a miracle set in motion. So this whole restoration process, it happens in two major steps. First, you've got to get the physical form back together. Only after that's done can the second part happen, the infusion of spiritual life. It's a very deliberate, step-by-step thing. I mean, can you even imagine how wild this command must have sounded? Ezekiel, the Watchman, is told to preach to a valley of skeletons. He's supposed to give a sermon to an audience that has no ears, to promise life to those who've been dead for ages. But you know what? Ezekiel does it. He obeys. And as he starts to speak the words he was given, the impossible happens. The silence is shattered by this incredible, massive, rattling sound that echoes all across the valley. And this isn't just a random explosion of parts. No, this is organized. It's almost like controlled chaos. Individual bones are actively looking for their counterparts. A femur finds its hip. A vertebra clicks into place with the one above it. You're watching an entire nation of bones put itself back together. And the miracle just keeps going. The skeletons don't stay bare. Sinews, the body's connective tissue, start wrapping around the bones, weaving them into a strong structure. And then flesh covers them. Suddenly, the valley floor isn't filled with skeletons anymore, but with whole, complete human bodies. So let's just pause for a second. The transformation is absolutely staggering. We've gone from total chaos to perfect order, from scattered pieces to whole bodies. The scene looks completely different. But here's the kicker. Look at that last line. Still no breath. They're perfectly formed, but they're not actually alive yet. Okay, so that brings us to part 2. And honestly, this is the most vital part of the whole thing. The physical assembly was just getting everything ready for the main event, the spiritual animation. So, once again, Ezekiel gets a command to speak to something you can't even see. This time, he isn't talking to the bones. He's told to speak to the breath, to the very essence of life itself. And to really get the weight of this, we've got to talk about this one Hebrew word, ruach. It's this amazing concept that means wind, breath, and spirit, all at the same time. This isn't just about oxygen. We're talking about the divine life force that comes directly from God. Ezekiel's being told to summon God's own spirit. So Ezekiel calls out, and the Ruach answers. This incredible wind rushes into the valley and it enters those silent bodies. Lungs that have been still forever suddenly pull in air. Hearts that were cold and motionless start to beat with this thunderous rhythm. And just like that, the transformation is complete. What was a valley of death has become a field of life. These aren't corpses anymore. They are a vast army, standing on their feet, totally alert, strong, and ready for whatever's next. The impossible has become reality. So what's the big idea here? What's the point of this whole wild vision? Now we get to shift from the story itself to what it all means. The Watchman's lesson about the journey from the grave to life. This is the huge light bulb moment for Ezekiel. He saw an entire valley of perfectly formed, organized bodies that were still totally dead. He realizes that you can have all the right structure, all the right order, even physical wholeness. But without that animating spirit, that ruach of God, it's all just lifeless. So this vision really lays out a few key principles for us. First, obedience, like Ezekiel showed, is the bridge out of our own graveyard situations and toward God's promises. Second, sometimes we find ourselves in these very dry places because we're meant to be a voice that calls for an awakening. Third, our human effort can get things organized. It can arrange the bones, but only God can breathe true life into it. And finally, we're called to speak up, even when a situation looks completely and utterly impossible. And here's the thing that takes this beyond just an old story. This is the promise. It's a declaration that the same power, the same spirit that brought that army to life in the valley, is still the sovereign Lord over every dry, forgotten, and hopeless place we could ever face. And that leaves us with one last, pretty personal question to chew on. The Watchman was told to speak to a graveyard. He had a choice between despair and obedience, and his words brought life from death. So take a look at your own world. What's the very dry valley, the seemingly impossible situation where you are being called to speak a word of hope?